Shalom, everyone. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach. On this beautiful morning with the birds chirping for Passover.
Morning.
Ethan says, Larry, look at you. You got
Oh, yeah, I still don't have the name thing right.
Just cute. Jeff, shalom. Good to see you. Deborah, what's up? How's Freedom? Got Lynn. Awesome. Dan's here. I see Ron.
Did you fight with the kids for the afikoman?
So I'll tell you guys, I didn't have to, thank God. They got it. Shalom, Marilyn. But I'm a little, I got my second shot of the vaccine.
Good. You get a reaction?
How are you feeling?
I feel totally conked out. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
That was terrible.
What's that? Larry,
I
you
had
had
a terrible reaction the second day. I was out with fever and chills and yeah.
That's common. That's quite common. It lasts about 24 hours.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, I'm like, everything hurts.
It's good though. It's good. It means you're having an immune reaction. Your body's doing what it's supposed to do. So
exactly.
I actually was a little worried because I barely had any response to the second one, and I was worried that like maybe it wasn't going to be effective. But
no, I didn't have any reaction either.
Yeah.
Like my arm was sore and I was tired for like a day, but.
Yeah, I mean, I fell asleep in the middle of the day, but I do that sometimes. So
yeah, same.
Everything hurts. Is that what you said, the rabbi? Everything hurts.
Yes.
Every bone, every muscle, every joint hurt like crazy.
Your body ache, right?
Yeah, I heard that from some people.
Yeah, but usually lasts only about 24 hours.
Yeah.
They recommend if you really feel it, to take Tylenol.
I was afraid to take anything. I didn't want to interfere with the immune reaction, so I just suffered.
Yeah, no, they said you shouldn't take Tylenol before, but you could take it after.
Right, exactly.
I didn't do it.
Because that can injure your immune reaction.
That's why if I'm a little bit slower than usual, you'll notice why, because I'm just feeling a little out of it. But
you just pour some chicken soup on it. That'll do it. Jewish penicillin, right?
You know, I'm usually a low energy person, so you know how it is.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. Right.
This is for me, you know.
Yeah. You probably pleaded with Jenny for some TLC.
It's hard when you got to deal with the Maror at the same time. All right, we got a nice crowd here. This is so lovely. Everyone's coming in. All right, Chevra, today we're going to do a little bit of tefillah, a little bit of davening, but also some learning, and we will absolutely conclude with the Mourner's Kaddish at the end. So if you'd like to do, if you want to get your hands on the text that we're going to study together, you can go on the website to the calendar. If you go to bethmar.org, like in a different window. I'll share it also. But if you'd like, you can go find the text that we're going to study this morning in honor of Pesach. I also, if you'd like to, we're going to recite the Mourner's Kaddish at the end as well. And we'll do a few other things. We can do the Shema Yisrael. We're going to do the blessing for Torah study. So I will lead you through. But those of you that actually have a Siddur with you could probably be helpful and easier if you can find those. We're going to only do a few specific prayers together here on Zoom. We're going to study and things like that. So if you do have a prayer book, then great. If you don't, no problem. We'll also do some share screen situation to help out. Let me just take a moment here to get that organized.
Rabbi,
We're also yes, my friend.
are you using the same link? Is this the same link for the entire Yontif?
No,
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 it's a special link.
it's a different one for each thing.
you have to
Exactly.
register for each one.
Sorry, Dave, I'm not in charge of that. That part's above my pay grade. I don't know how that works so well. I'm not so good at that, but all right. Okay. So here's what I would like to do. We're still on Zoom. It's I hope you all had good seders. Maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit, just to say how we're doing. But what I'd like to do is what Jenna thought we'd do something just a little creative here in the sunny day is we'll pray the Shema Yisrael and the V'ahavta together. We'll take some time for a silent Amidah together in our spaces. And again, if you feel comfortable if you'd like to use the traditional prayer book, you should feel free to have with you. But again, we can now take our time to offer it in our hearts. The challenge of Zoom or still being separate is that we don't have, the chances to daven traditionally. At the same time, it is a time for creativity. And the mystics often encourage people to pray from their heart, to pray what comes up from the depths of their soul, especially on Passover was issues of freedom, issues of wanting to release from the narrow places of Mitzrayim, those of old and those today. So we'll do the Shema Yisrael, Amidah, then we'll do a little study together. We'll conclude with the Mourner's Kaddish together. Okay. So how about this? Why don't we just go before we get started, we'll do a very brief runaround because it's just a great group here. Why don't you go on real quickly and just say what was a highlight of your Seder last night? For some reason, if you did not have a Seder last night, what are you looking forward to on Passover? All right, I'm going to call on Larry Sichel, Larry or Ethan. Larry, what was a highlight?
Well, it was nice. I had all three boys with me, and we just had the four of us, and did a nice traditional Passover Seder.
Wonderful. All right, Jeff Margolis, how about you?
Yeah, Chag Sameach, everybody. I actually have a football question I wanted to proffer to Dan Dembow, any other football fans, and that is, how's the Washington Football Club like your conversion of your GI tract from the leaven to the unleavened situation? And the answer is, until you get used to both of them, we'll keep it polite now. We'll keep it, nice. Until you get used to both of them or whatever, you might kind of gas the joint up a little bit. So there you go. Great Seder.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, all right, Deborah, how about you?
It was very nice. It was smaller than last year, but I spent about a month putting together a siddur that I was really happy with. So, and people liked it. So it was lovely. It was lovely. It'll be nice to be in a room together next year.
God willing.
Amen.
Next year together. All right, Dan, how about you?
We had our daughter, two of our granddaughters, and 3 dogs for our Seder. 2 of our granddaughters are out of town. My son-in-law is out of town. We hooked up a bit with our daughter up in New York. She had a little Seder, just her and her husband. It was nice, at least for some family to get together.
That's nice, Dan. So basically you had a bark mitzvah.
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
All right, Lynn, how about you?
Very fortunate, was with my son, daughter-in-law, and 2 granddaughters, and the Machatonim, and we were inside without masks because we were all vaccinated, and we were able to hug each other, and it was just like a machaya.
Exactly.
It was wonderful.
Gave you back your soul. Thank God. Thank God. Marilyn, how about you?
So we actually did not do a Seder last night. I worked my normal number of hours this past week, including Friday. I picked up an extra shift Friday because I'm an idiot and I forgot. So we're doing the Zoom Seder tonight, but this especially being really our first Passover, I didn't have the time or energy to prepare to do it twice. So we didn't do it last night. We did watch the Rugrats Passover episode to kind of get the kids prepared. They loved it. But we'll be at the Zoom Seder tonight, and I think everybody is really looking forward to that.
That's awesome, Marilyn. We're excited. Great. Rugrats did a great job.
Oh, it's great. And I put a what's it called? Spotify playlist on, and we've listened to Dianu 17,000 times, trying to teach the kids the songs and stuff. So we'll see.
That's cute.
And by the way, you're not an idiot. Number one, you're learning. And number two, you're a nurse. And when you're a medical professional, and Larry knows this, you are exempt from other mitzvot because you're busy keeping people well.
That's right.
True. I just, it would have been better to not.
It would have been nice.
To not pick up, because I didn't have to work today. That was extra. And I don't know where my brain was when I volunteered for that, but oh well.
Okay. It's okay.
It's working out.
You're learning.
There you go. Thank you.
All right. David Glass, our newest congregant, new member of Beth Meyer Synagogue. David.
It was a quiet, short service. I missed the shul Seder that we have every year, where you perform.
No, believe me, so do we. God willing, next year. But thanks, David.
Well, join us tonight, David.
Yeah, tonight also doing it.
We'll perform from home.
All right, Ron Rutsky, the pride of Beth Meyer in Illinois.
Thanks. Just following up on something Lynn said, quick question. With the holidays coming up like Pesach, can we now rename them Hugim? So also we had this was Google Meets this year. Last year it was Zoom with Solomon and Sarah and Naphtali and Raphael and Moira. We also had Sarah's parents from Portland. And we also, again, had Sarah's grandmother from Kauai, Hawaii. And then we had my sister-in-law and brother-in-law from Chicago Heights and so on. So it was great. We used the PJ's Haggadah again. And Glenn, Sarah's father, and I kind of coordinated that beforehand. And it was good. It was great.
Awesome, Ron.
Thanks.
Shkoyach. All right, Sherry, how about you? Are you in Raleigh or in Western North Carolina? You were there for a little bit.
Yeah, actually, we are back from the mountains. I can't see myself. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And we had for our first time, 3 friends join us for a Seder last night, and we actually could hug each other, and it was just wonderful. Liberation coming out of the long passage of last year. So we were very appreciative. And Tzvi led a great Seder.
Oh, wonderful. Good to see you in the wings, Tzvi.
All right, so everyone else is here that does not have their camera on. So I know that maybe they're not ready to share or whatever. So I'll just say, does anyone else who doesn't have a camera on, which would willing to say, maybe in the chat, any highlights, or we'll give you a moment to comment? Not forcing, Pharaoh's not forcing anyone to put their video on. Don't
No
worry.
force sharing.
This is Marty Kaplan here. Like
Yes.
some of the others, because of vaccinations, we were able to have a Seder with our daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter. And even though Zoom's okay, it was really special and nice having it in person.
Amen.
Lovely.
Amen.
I'll chime in. It's Amy here. And I was delighted to be invited to Deborah's Seder. She did a fabulous job, and it was lovely people. And she was gracious enough to invite my sister from Maryland to join us. But then when it ended, I joined a Seder on the Big Island of Hawaii and sat in with my son and his girlfriend. He first got a little annoyed. I think he thought I was going to lead things, but there was a little bit of a delay between here and Hawaii. So I left it all up to him. And it was just lovely watching my son do the Seder. He knew it.
Amy, the number of Hawaii connections is unbelievable. And, the Salazes are in there. Plus, Amy, I'm still living off his cantorial rendition of what he did for Purim. Was still amazing. That was unbelievable.
Well, he'll be in Philadelphia starting, I think, in the end of May. And so at least he'll be on the same time zone. So that'll be
Very
great.
exciting.
We might have to bring him down for Beth Meyer Seder next year, a little rendition or something. And let my people go or something. All right. Awesome. All right. Anyone else?
I wanted to add something. This is Leonard and Amy. We Zoomed at our Seder with our son, Adam in Washington and my sister and family. And we did through the Shekianu, and the Shekianu was really very meaningful because it talks about sustaining us and reaching the season. And, my parents and Amy's dad, we all made it through this. So it felt really meaningful to say the Shekianu.
And we were together.
So true, Larry. That is beautiful. Amen. That is so true. All right. Anyone else? Is it Jordan Miller over there? The Millers? Yeah. You got mute yourself. You have to unmute, my friend. Yes, there you go.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah. Barbara and I had our Seder together. It was shortened, but very meaningful because our daughter-in-law, who has been suffering from depression and in and out of the hospital the whole year, it came out Erev Pesach and talked to Barbara for the very first time in over a year. That she has been so depressed and suicidal, it was a very hard year, but boy, it's like it's all lifted off of us that she's coming around now, and because they have 3 small babies.
Wow. Thank God.
I'm
What
so
a
glad
blessing.
for your family,
Thank you so much for
Jordan.
sharing that. That is so powerful. Talk about coming out of Egypt. Thank God.
Yeah.
Out of the plague of darkness.
Yeah, it's such a meaningful Pesach for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, wow. That's so heavy. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay. Any last people before we'll get a little bit into a little davening, a little learning? Did we miss anybody? You also can put in the chat if you'd like. Just check in. All right. So
go ahead.
I want to share screens. Okay. So I'm going to share screen here for the Shema Yisrael. Where was it? I had it all set up on I had it set up. How do I? Sorry, guys. I'm using Jenny's computer. I'm a little less facile with her computer.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So where is it here? Share, I think, right? Let me try it one more time. There we go. All right. So we're going to. It's not great with the with the commercials here, but if you have your own Siddur, then you can open up to the Shema Yisrael. We do have a mini here, thank God. So we will be saying the Shema Yisrael together, chanting it. The Baruch Shem Kavod quietly, and then we'll do V'ahavta Hafta together. And to prepare for that, I just, this is actually Rabbi Jenny's wheelhouse, but I feel like it's a beautiful moment just to be in touch with the oneness, the oneness of coming back together to some degree this year on Pesach with people, the oneness of this moment for those of you that are perhaps outside or even looking maybe outside a window and get a sense of what it means to be at one with nature and with the spring that has returned. It's kind of a remarkable cycle of the year. We've been through a year plus of this experience, but also just kind of like it to be at one with with the moment, to not have to be separate from it, but to really feel ourselves as being on the road to freedom, to be in this moment of stepping forward and being one. So I invite you, if you'd like, just to before we chant the Shema Yisrael together, just to if you'd like to take a breath, nice deep breath into your diaphragm area, one that kind of through your nose. Like to take in freedom, and let go of, plague, so to speak. And if it's your tradition to cover your eyes, if you have a talit, you should feel free to do so. We'll chant together. Shema. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך וכל נפשך וכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אמרתי לך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך שוכבך וקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והיו לטודפו בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. Okay, so we've offered the main, these are the Ikarim, the main foci of the morning tefillah, morning service. One is the Shema Yisrael and the other is the Amidah. So again, if you have a traditional siddur for the Chag, there are special insertions for the Amidah and Pesach, for Shachri in particular, called Ya'aleh V'Yavo and other things about Pesach. But even if you don't have a siddur, it's okay. What we're going to invite you to do is just to rise and face east towards Jerusalem. And we will begin just like, just really making this a silent Amidah time. Chance for each of us to open up our hearts. So, don't be limited by the provok. Really, this is your chance on Zoom, Pesach, it's creativity time. If you find yourself, just think about themes of freedom, gratitude. I think we'd spend a whole Amidah just doing Dayenu. It would be enough if only this happened, if this little piece happened. If I only had a vaccine, if I only had the chance to get a vaccine, only had the chance for my family members to have a vaccine, etc. So we could really play with what it means to be grateful on Passover. If you have a chance to look outside a window or to have a chance to look at nature again, it's a beautiful opportunity to focus on a gorgeous morning after a lot of rainstorms. So I invite you just to rise. We're not going to lead this per se. We'll end with Oseh Shalom in a minute or two. And just take time for silent Amidah.
What page if we want to look at the prayer book?
306.
I think it's 306.
Thanks.
Dainu, dai, dainu, dai, dainu, dai, dainu, dainu, dainu. Inu natan natan lanu natan lanu et Torah natan lanu et Torah dainu. So we see a few people are still davening, which is so beautiful. I'm so inspiring, connecting to the Holy One. For those who are complete your Amidah, if you'd like, you can go to the bethmar.org website to this specific service on the calendar. If you go to calendar, and it'll say a Torah teaching for first day of Pesach. I'm also going to share our screen here too. So we can do this, Gavalt. Maybe don't worry about it. Let's go like this. Okay. All right, shalom everyone. So in the chat, I put the very brief conclusion to the bracha for studying Torah. So it's Baruch, Ata, etc. Last b'divrei Torah. So please join with me or us. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher hishanu b'tzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok
b'divrei Torah.
Amen. Okay. So if you either have a copy on the website or you can share screen, right? People can see the screen, can see it. Yeah. It's called heavy lifting. All right. So one of the questions you may, and some of you may already, may be familiar with this or not, I don't know, from the Seder itself, is in the Seder, there's a famous line, we're going to go through it. Rabban Gamliel says there's 3 things you have to teach about in your Seder. You haven't done it, to its last detail or something like that. I think how it says in English. And one of the things it says, there's 3 things are very important and actually tells you to lift up and show these things. Maybe you remember this, it's from the Seder last night or seen it. But only 2 of the 3 are actually lifted up in the Seder. The question is, why? Why don't we lift all 3 pieces that Rabban Gamliel wants us to emphasize and teach in the Seder? Remember, the Seder, the whole point of the Seder is the famous mitzvah, you shall teach the child or teach the children or teach each other. And according to Maimonides, it doesn't actually need to be a child. You can teach whoever's around or even teach yourself. The whole point of the night is to learn about the Exodus story, regardless of age, generation, whatever, but to tell the story. So the question is, Rabban Gamliel says tell it by 3 particular things, but he wants you to lift up 2, not lift up 1. Okay, does anyone already have by any chance know why that is or any theories why that is or even everyone familiar with this idea? Have you heard of this before? Not even heard of it. Okay. Has anyone seen in your Seder where it says lift this up, lift up the matzah, lift up the thing? Okay, you're familiar with that part, yeah? You've seen that, you read it in the narrator notes? Okay. So good. We want to stump you and teach you something new. For those of you doing a Zoom Seder tonight, you'll hear more about it. Those who are on your own, you'll know for next year. So why is it? All right. So as usual, we're going to look at the Talmud. The Talmud's going to tell us what Rabban Gamliel was teaching. Why is it that 2 are lifted and 1 is not? And what's going on with that there? Okay. Do I have someone volunteer to be able to would read this out loud for us and we'll unmute them and be our reader mensch? Okay, Lynn Vakasha. Tadar Rabba Lynn, will you please read?
Rabban Gamliel would say, anyone who did not say these 3 matters on Pesach has not fulfilled one's obligation, the Paschal lamb, matzah, and bitter herbs. When one mentions these matters, he must elaborate and explain them. Okay. Gemara.
Yeah, Gemara. Just about 1 second. Just try. Let's get. So this is the Mishnah and the Gemara. This is what's called the Talmud. These are 2 parts. The Mishnah is the most ancient part of Jewish law. Many of you are familiar. Very short Jewish teachings that like of legal status. And then the Gemara is the commentary that came sometimes hundreds of years later, but come together. Together, they're placed into the Talmud. So it starts with Rabban Gamliel. Says the 3 things: the Paschal lamb, the matzah, and the bitter herbs. Okay, Paschal lamb today is symbolized by the shank bone, or someone like in our house we use a red beet because we trying to be sensitive to the animals kind of thing. All right, but the and why do we have a Paschal lamb? Just remind us here.
That was the last meal before.
Last meal, we took the blood,
right,
put it on the doorpost, right? Matzah we all know, and maror to make us cry. So those are 3 like really powerful pieces. And you want to add?
Ron?
Yeah, Ron, please.
Do we assume this is from Talmud Bavli, not Talmud Yerushalmi?
That is. Yeah, Ron, you fit. Yes, this is the Babylonian Talmud, which to be fair is usually the one that when you don't mention it, like what it is, that's the one. But you're right, it could have been Jerusalem Talmud. And the truth is, it's going to have relevance to exactly some of the issues you're mentioning, Ron. So you maybe you read ahead, but you're thinking with a Yiddish cup. Okay, yes, it's interesting here. Okay, so Paschal lamb to remind us the lamb sacrifice and the blood on the doorpost, matzah, leaving Israel quickly, maror. Rabban Gamliel basically says these three things tell the whole story. And his view is like the whole story is told in three things. It's like gets it down to its raw core. All right. But now they're going to go a little bit further. Okay, Lynn, will you keep on reading here with Rava is going to comment, another later rabbi is going to comment on this issue of the three things.
Rava said, when mentioning the Exodus from Egypt, one must say, and God took us out from there. Furthermore, Rava said, when one mentions matzah in the list of the three matters, one must recall during the Seder, one must lift the matzah for display before the assembled company. Likewise, when discussing maror, one must raise them. However, nowadays, one need not raise the meat. And not only that, but it is prohibited to do so. For if one lifts the meat, it appears as though he is eating sacrificial meat outside the temple. An observer might think the leader is presenting it as the meat of a paschal lamb, and it is prohibited by Torah law to slaughter a sheep as a paschal lamb outside the temple. That would make sense if it's the Babylonian Talmud, I guess, because they don't have a temple.
Okay, that's true. Yes, I mean, exiled for a long time. That's true. But even in Jerusalem, the temple's destroyed too, to be fair, at this point.
Unless they're all
but
vegan,
you're right.
they don't want to eat meat.
Right, well, that's another issue for us to get early vegetarians.
Right.
All right, but let's just come back for a second. Okay, let's just come back. So when you're sitting at the table, according to Rav, I just wants to clarify. He says, look, yeah, Rabban Gamliel teach three things: meat, matzah, maror. Fine, but lift them up. Which, I mean, I don't want to get ahead of this here. I want to give you a chance to discuss, but you can imagine lifting up is part of the educational moment here, right? You're saying like if there are people at your table who don't know what matzah is ever in their entire life, who knows? Maybe it's children. Say like this thing here. Look at the bitter herbs. This thing here, this we say horseradish. Back then it was chazeret or different. Middle East didn't have horse. Poland is more of a horseradish place, but whatever. It was whatever they had the equivalent of that bitter herbs. Okay. But then he said, but it comes to Paschal lamb, they're getting it's confusing. Wait a second, we want you to have it on your table because it reminds you of the temple when we used to offer the lamb sacrifice when Passover occurred. But at this end, no, actually, but don't lift it up because it might look like you're eating it. And therefore but you shouldn't eat the Paschal lamb. So hold on a second. Shouldn't they just said then, don't put the Paschal lamb on the table altogether? Don't put the shank bone on the table altogether? Why would you put it on the table but then not allowed to lift it? Wait a second. Is that such a distinction? And by the way, and actually I'm thinking of Amy here because I know Amy's familiar with this. There's an issue here. It's just what it looks like. Some people call this Maris Ayin, Marit Ayin. Amy knows this one. Uncle Morris, people call it. What it looks like, meaning there's an issue under Jewish law, not about what you're doing is wrong, but what it looks like is wrong. So perception. So for a perfect example, and this, I don't want anyone breaking this law on my account, but according to the Torah, you cannot boil a kid in its mother's milk. Everyone knows that famous law, and that developed into meat, and milk cannot be eaten together as a keeping kosher. But chicken is poultry. In theory, you can have a chicken parmesan. Don't quote me on that. Why can't you? Because what it looks like. There's an interesting idea in Jewish law about what it looks like. It confuses people. It confuses others who may think that that's a way of keeping kosher. It looks like meat, so therefore. So this idea of Marit Ayin, what it looks like, is really big on the Seder when it's a whole night where a lot of it's about food and the table, and you're teaching a story and you want to educate, but you taking seriously what it looks like. Okay. Before we go any further, any questions or thoughts about why two and not the last Paschal lamb, or what they give here as an example? Any thoughts on this dynamic? Why not just get rid of the Paschal lamb altogether? Why have it? Why not lift it? Any thoughts about this? Maybe you could put your name in the chat. Who did this, Joe? What do you think? Chat? How do you just unmute yourself? Yeah, unmute yourself. Okay, just unmute yourself. Or did I stump you?
Well, I was going to say, I think that there's a question, maybe two questions about what it is you're teaching. So you're teaching the story of the Exodus and freedom, but you're also teaching that there are certain limitations to what we can or can't do because we no longer have a temple. And I think that, I don't know when this was written exactly, but I think that there was a period during the time that the Talmudic rabbis were writing when they were expecting there to be a temple again. It wasn't like they thought there was never going to be a temple again, or at least for 2,000 years, as we've learned now. And so they were teaching what to do. It was an interim. It was like a stopgap. This is what we're going to do now. But once we have the temple again, we'll be able to go back and do this. So you put the Paschal lamb on your Seder plate or whatever, because you want to remember the sacrifice, because we might be doing the sacrifice for several reasons. Among them, you might be doing the sacrifice again. But we're not doing the sacrifice right now because you can't sacrifice outside the temple. And that's an important thing to know too. And I would guess that especially in the early days of the destruction of the temple, that was an issue because people still wanted to make sacrifices. They couldn't do it outside the temple, and they were probably still doing it. Some people were probably still doing it. So it's that whole sort of lesson plan, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. I would say, like, and as an educator, you're hitting it. I think it's an interesting tension when it's a live option, potentially option, or a hoped for option to go back to a temple in a realistic, or they're really pining for it. And so they're trying to find that fine line of having as part of the story and part of the education, generation to generation, but also want to distinguish between the two. I think you're right. You're right on that kind of tension around the two.
And when we teach both what we want our students to do and not to do. I mean, those are both part of the lesson.
You fit. Any other thoughts about this before we push a little further? You know, there is actually Jewish law. So I don't even know, you shouldn't have lamb at the Passover Seder as your meal.
Not only that it's traditional not to have any roasted food. And in fact, later legal questions come up around, can you roast your potatoes? Can you roast your vegetables? And of course, the answer is yes, but the same concern here that Rabbi Eric mentioned about what it looks like, you know, what's the slippery slope? So there's a tradition that not only do you not eat lamb, which in some Jewish communities, they davka eat lamb, but in many communities they don't, especially Ashkenazi. And not only that, no roasting your meat at all. So that was a very loud car. So even if you do have meat, not to roast it.
Hey, Ron, what do you say, Ron?
Another question is going back to the title. Why is it heavy lifting?
This was just my little kitschy thing, but did you have? Are you asking a question? Or do you have a comment on it?
Yeah, I'm asking. I'm not sure if heavy like meaning weight mentally weighted or what. I mean, you're lifting the matzah's not heavy. The maror's not heavy. What's heavy?
So I was kind of being a little tongue in cheek a little bit, but I would say it's Ron. You're good. Look at you, very Talmudic scholar asking questions about the title. Look at you, Ron. Amazing. All right, but I was saying, like, basically it's a heavy lick. Each of these things, like to bring up the maror and the bitter herb, bring up the maror and the matzah, right? It's not physically heavy, but it's spiritually heavy. What I think is interesting though is that, like, again, like the Paschal lamb, one of the arguments could have been to not have it at the table at all, and it could have been that in the Haggadah it says it could have had a line. We will not have a Paschal lamb at our table to remember the fact that we are different from the temple. Like it could have said that, right? To not have this symbol at all. But instead, the rabbis played a kind of half step, which I think Deborah's talking about. They brought it, they said, like a zecher, just like the Hillel sandwich, you know, it's like we do that piece where we eat like the maror and chorus. That's how Hillel used to do it. So it's like, it's such an experience of really thinking through the educational model of what you want to pass on, what part of the story you want to pass on, and what part of the story perhaps is less important or whatever. Like that's really the key. And it gets more complicated when you don't want people to get too comfortable with a non-temple existence. Again, like Deborah was saying, how do you get them to say, I think of this also, by the way, at the end of the Seder, it says next year in Jerusalem. What does it mean next year in Jerusalem? When Jerusalem was not under Jewish sovereignty, which was most of modern. And what's it like to say next year in Jerusalem when we could go to Jerusalem next year? So when you say next year in Jerusalem, many people say it's a metaphor. It's not just Jerusalem here, it's Jerusalem of peace. It's not next just Jerusalem. The place, it's a world of peace, things like this. So there are some lines that are metaphorical. Yeah, Amy, what do you want to say?
Well, I'm just, I'm starting going a slightly different direction with this, that it brings up the issue to me of memory in general and its purpose. So this is something both, you know, we want to have a placeholder for sacrifices in the temple perhaps, and we don't want to forget. But what about, like, I mean, I'm extending it a little crazy here, but like to the statues that we're taking down and the buildings that we're renaming, and how do we hold memory, and what are place markers? Like, I don't want that hatred to be forgotten, right? I'd like it to be erased in our time, but I don't want us to forget that it happened in that time. So it's an interesting comment about how you hold on to difficult memories.
Amy, Rabbi Rips, you're rocking out of the house. I totally agree. I think it's so true. Okay, you get me all fired up. I love what Amy just said. I love it. We did a Federation event a couple weeks ago. I don't know if anyone were there, where some people from the community were talking about, one of the questions we asked, I was honored and privileged to be on this like group with Phil Brodsky, our new Federation director. One of the questions they asked is, how will we hold on to coronavirus time, sadly, those who died, and yet also go back into the world and hopefully live a life that can embrace the gifts of what life we can return to? Like, how will we balance those two things of remembering the pain and yet embracing the gifts of, you know, please God, like what is approaching? Okay. And my thought of it is that this has been the Jewish problem forever. This is the challenge. And Amy says, how do we hold on to something, even if it's not positive? How do we hold on to it and don't forget it, and yet at the same time move forward? Like Deborah's point also, she's saying, look, the rabbis then might have really thought they could come back to the temple. But let's say they thought even if it wasn't going to happen, they didn't want to let go of that idea. They wanted to hold on to the idea. That has been a problem even for us modern Jews. I imagine most people on this call really don't expect and pray for a true temple to return in Jerusalem for a million different reasons, including modern political reasons. It's a very dangerous problem. However, would we want to get rid of that idea altogether? Don't we want to hold on to at least the idea, to struggle with it, to think about it, something about our story? How do we hold on to those things that maybe aren't as relevant in real life anymore, but have important teaching for us? And Amy's adding in, and what about those things that are negative events that we want to hold on to something about it, even though we don't want to hold on its message of hate, God forbid, like the statue, but we want to remember that they existed, that there was actually a period of time where they were up, is an important part of American history, you know? That's a really tough educational call. It is about memory. Great point, Amy. Okay, Dan, what do you say?
Well, it's the responsibility that we have to pass on from generation to generation. I mean, one of the issues, and Amy knows this quite well, that one of the concerns is that history taught in public schools, you know, because there's so much more history to cover, individual elements within history get shrunk to next to nothing. And the concern is that future generations might not know what has happened and why it's happened. And we talk about, you know, the Seder, and you raised it. One of the main themes is educating, you know, younger generations as to what took place. So with the Paschal Lamb, it was part of what took place in Egypt. I think one of the significant things about the Seder plate and all the items that are on it, such as the egg representing life, it's to explain all aspects of it. You may want to emphasize some portions of it more than others, but it all has to be taught, or that next generation isn't going to know about it, and then passed on to the next generation, it'll disappear altogether.
I mean, this really, I think, Dan, you're onto something very strong here in terms of the rabbis at that time. They were thinking very carefully. I don't know if they knew how much it would be listened to, how carefully, but they took it seriously. And they said, look, what we include in the Seder and what we don't is going to matter for a long time until we get back. So therefore, they had to play with it. And I just want to say, like, even the templates that look today, and I'm looking at Deborah and Amy and all our educators too. Look, when the kids get the bar mitzvah parshas from Vayikra and Leviticus, they're generally not fired up. It's all the sacrifice stuff. It's so foreign. It's so foreign. At the same time, though, there's a lot of richness in this, and I'm glad we didn't eliminate the third book of the Torah. Okay, there's a lot in there, but you have to dig a little deeper. The sacrifice part it is one of the weaker parts of what can be passed on. But they didn't erase it. They kept onto it, even though it's so foreign, because it dealt with a temple, a specific place, rituals, the Kohanim. It's foreign for most Jews, even over time with no temple existing. It became quickly difficult to practice or theoretical at most, but it was held on to. It's a powerful idea. Like, how do you hold on to things and keep something in an ember alive, even if you don't expect to be practiced soon?
And of course, the same thing in the Talmud. There are whole tractates of the Talmud dedicated to sacrifices. So the rabbis already were, some of them hundreds of years from a time when they were offered, but somehow those rabbis still had the information and were intellectually curious about understanding their deeper meaning and preserving that spiritual technology, if only intellectually, if only in memory. And again, perhaps because there's some day when it would return, I don't know, couldn't possibly imagine in their minds, but also perhaps because there's a kind of humility and an educational, a pedagogical understanding that there is still wisdom to be accessed from these things, even if they're not performed in real time. And that's why when you go through this, many of you know, the Daf Yomi cycle, we continue to include all of these tractates in the same way that we include Vayikra in the middle of the Torah.
I also wonder if, Talmud, the rabbis grappling with Talmud is they're grappling with trying to understand how God thought, right? Why, how, what, for want of a better word. And I think that memory in some ways is also grappling with how our ancestors thought. So like, Amy's example of the statues, how did people think that brought them to a place where they wanted to put up these statues, or that they wanted to glorify this period in our histories? What was happening in people's lives? What was going on? Where were they that this became something that they organized their lives around? And I think that's an important thing to understand if we're going to understand how not to have that hate happen again. So in the same way, to understand the sacrifices and all these intricate details about it, maybe we'll never do that again. But understanding how God thought about that is an important way of understanding how God is what our relationship with God is and how God is in this world.
It's like the underneath messages.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, more Rabbi Amy. Go ahead, Amy. Hit us another one.
Well, I just, regarding the sacrifices, because this is an area of Judaism that I just, so to speak, avoid like the plague. I hate them. I hate reading about them. And I remember I'm sorry if I'm misquoting, but I remember years and years and years ago, like around when Dick Friedman's book came out, like you were just fascinated by the plagues, or at least I remember being in discussion that, you're really interested. And I thought, how can you be interested in this? But this year, and Rabbi, you may have spoken about it, I know others have, I never really focused on the word korban, korban Pesach, the sacrifice, and its relationship to the word karov, which means to draw near. And for me, from a very young age, from like the age of 13, the line in Ashrei, my verse, my pasuk is karov Adonai l'kol korav, the verse, the kuf verse in the Ashrei, and that God is there for those who call upon God. Like God is close to those who want to be close. And so when I started thinking about the sacrifices this year after these teachings, and along with Deborah said, if they truly saw the sacrifices as a way to draw close to God, and then now they were bereft of that, they really needed to explore, what does it mean to be close to God? What is God? Like they were really, really searching and seeking when they discussed these sacrifices, sometimes ad nauseum, especially for those of us that are vegetarian, that they were just trying to seek that closeness or regain it, perhaps regaining something that was lost.
Amy, you're rocking it. Home runs. Yes. Amen. It's amazing. Exactly. You're totally. And I'm just going to just riff off what you're saying. I think also they're kind of like, they're not willing to get, again, like once the temple's gone, the easy choice, I'm saying this with a lot of humility, easier would be to eliminate all sacrificial or all temple-based stuff from
I'm like, just kind of chop it off. You can say like, okay, because just to be clear for a second, right? Because we know one of the reasons why we lost the Roman War. I mean, again, in addition that we were small, is that some of the zealots were so temple focused, Jerusalem focused, like they were so focused on not losing the temple that they end up sparking us. Like there was obsession, you could say. And the rabbis were more moderate and they were kind of more central at the temple to be destroyed, obviously. But they didn't want to die for it either. They wanted to try and find a way to live with both at the same time. But they could have said, you know what, if we keep focusing on the temple and coming back to Deborah's point, even though they thought it was a live option, maybe, there's only one way it's going to happen was through war, basically. I mean, unless, okay, fine, God comes down and maybe it's a miracle. But in general, it's the Bar Kokhba revolts and Akiva and all that. It was war. And there were definitely rabbis who didn't want war. So they could have just said, let's de-emphasize completely a temple. Let's remove it from the Seder, from the Haggadah. Let's really downplay it 100%. But they don't. They hold on to a little bit. So then what is it we can grab from the name is offering? Well, maybe it's again, metaphor, spiritualization. What are the underneath roots, as Deborah said? What are they saying when they say sacrifice? What can we learn from that? And hold on to the temple on some level. What does it mean to yearn for that place? What does it mean to yearn for closeness with God at a time when we felt close to God? Maybe we feel more distant from God now. That might be some bigger questions to ask.
And I would even suggest that part of a robust spirituality, a mature spirituality, is one in which we actually like channel yearning. Yearning isn't bad, or restraint. There are things we can have and there are things we can't have. And that sort of capacity to restrain ourselves, to moderate ourselves, to make choices, even on the Pesach, meal. We have like all of these hopefully beautiful, wonderful, indulgent foods, but there's a whole category of stuff we cannot have. In addition to the roasted meat, I mean, there's like chametz. And not only is it okay, it's actually like true. It's life. It's important to be able to control oneself. And that feeling of yearning is also part of what it means to be alive, and not something we need to hide from, but rather even kind of make a space for it.
So unless there are any other last comments, we'll just wrap up here. Anybody else about yeah, Ron, please, Vaksha.
Well, I know it's sacrifices are so prominent, but also I'm reminded of the passage where God has said, I don't want your sacrifices of animals. They're an abomination to me. I want the sacrifice where you're feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, and so on. That's what I want, not the sacrifice of animals. And we have moved past that. That is the
famous Haftarah of Yom Kippur. Yes, of Isaiah. Yes, Ryan, you're right. I mean, look, there's a tension within the Bible, the Hebrew Bible itself, about an overemphasis on sacrifices as opposed to the meaning of the ritual, the ethics, the morals. Kol hakavod. So unless there's anything else, I'll just say that. So in close, now you all know, okay? Because in the Seder, like if you look at your Haggadahs, whatever Haggadah you use, it generally doesn't describe why do you lift up this one and why do you not. But now you know. And I think hopefully it'll be a source of conversation if you do a Seder tonight or next year, to keep this page somewhere in your Haggadah, stick it in there. As the kind of say about yearning, restraint, how do we deal with memory? How do we deal with how do the rabbis keep things going from generation to generation? How do they distinguish? And even like, what are the three most important things is kind of an interesting question itself. Like, I don't know if, the sacrifice piece is so low on our Seder table today in general but, obviously that was big for the rabbis at that time. What it was so important. They wanted to hold that interesting tension between wanting to hold it as a possibility, but also not emphasize it too much so people think that they can have a temple somewhere else or do sacrifice somewhere else. It's a fascinating tension educationally. All right, Yesher Koach, Kol hakavod, a robust, awesome learning. Always a pleasure. We're going to wrap up now as we get close to 11 with the Mourner's Kaddish. And we're going to invite those who are in mourning or observing a yard site on Pesach, and perhaps particularly, missing and holding close to our heart, those at this time. I'm going to share. Let me get the Kaddish on our screen here. And many of you, of course, have that in your Sidurim as well. I'm also realizing that some people I think might have mentioned things in the chat, and maybe did you mention some comments here that I missed? Oy vey. Is it possible to look at the chat? Hold on a second. Oh, I see. Gosh, you guys shared in the chat. I'm sorry. Hold on a second here. Let me just share it real
We
quick.
get very excited.
I'm
and it's
sorry,
hard
Jeff.
to-
My bad. Jeff says anything to the difference between two examples in the plant world and one example of fellow mammal, evoking an image of cruelty or inappropriate levity. Wow. Wow. And Shakal Chemi. I didn't even think about that. Oh my gosh, you're right. Animals versus plants. Ron, the rebuilding of the temple is also tied into coming Messiah. Exactly. Our eternal hope that keeps us going. You fit. Jeff, Avodah service, Yom Kippur, is the scapegoat lifted and tossed on the rocks, or scapegoat sent on its way to the wilderness? That's an interesting question. I thought it was sent on its way, but you're kind of making a connection here. I think it skips on its way. So that's what Ron says. Well, you fit. So just also making some connections between other rituals like on Yom Kippur as well with sacrifices too. All right. So now let me come back to share screen. Okay, you can see the mourners Kaddish, everybody, I hope. Okay. So those who like to honor those who are no longer with us, mourners Kaddish. Yit Gadal ve'yit Kadash Shmei Rabbah.
Amen.
Amen.
Alma Tivra Chirute v'amlich Malchute. B'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman kariv v'yimru. Amen.
Amen.
Shmei Rabbah Almaya. Yit Barach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitale v'yithalal Shmei Rekudisha
Brichu.
Leila Mikol Birchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Damiran bi'alma v'yimru. Amen.
Amen.
Hey Shlama Rabba min Shamaya v'chaim aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen.
Amen.
Yaseh shalom v'yimroma hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'yimru.
Amen.
All right, so friends, this is our creative Pesach service day one. Such a nachas to be here together. Can't wait till we can all hang out together, eventually soon. Stay tuned for more information about that. We are reopening task force is actively working on potentially Irtz Hashem, over time, some small gathering. We're going to give some attempts at this in the near future, please God. Tonight, 7 o'clock is our Seder, Zoom Seder at the shul. At home, but whatever. It's going to be together. And we're more experienced here second time around, so hopefully be even smoother. And then tomorrow morning, we'll do a similar davening for Pesach Day 2. Shema
Same link. Same link.
I don't think it is, unfortunately, and this is probably good feedback.
No, you have to register for each individual, for each program individually. It's a different link, but it's right on the website. If you just go there and you click on it, you can register. It's easy to do.
Okay.
And what other Pesach programs this week, Jenny, you want to mention or?
Well, looking ahead, of course, we have the end of Pesach davening,
Right.
but looking ahead to the very, very end, we hope that you'll join us for your first taste of chametz. We're going to have pizza dinner for anyone who wants to come. You can either literally drive by and we'll hand it to you in the window, or you're welcome to get out of your car and we'll eat on the field, weather permitting. Will be really nice to be together, socially distant.
Exactly.
We're going to keep our spacing. But will be great to have some pizza
The
together.
question is, melon mushroom or lilies, Jenny? Which one?
I'm not in charge.
Okay, Ron, you can have Chicago style over there, okay? And Deborah likes Chicago also, so she has Chicago style. Everyone else, New York style or melon mushroom, okay? Don't worry. It's kosher. All right. I know we could keep this link open if you want. If people just want to keep it a little bit in shmooze, if anyone would like to say, or you if you have to, yeah, okay. If to sign off, feel free to sign off. This concludes our davening and our experiences together.
Chag Sameach to everyone.
Ken.
Chag
Have
Sameach.
a decent Pesach. Enjoy matzah.
Yeah.
For your time.
Yeah.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach,
Chag
everybody. Chag Sameach, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Next year in person.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Hi, Paulina. I'm so sorry.
Hi,
I was just a little shy to show my face, but I'm still learning. I'm just very, very new to just learning, and I'm open to learning.
What's your last name, Paulina?
Clamp.
Okay, great. And you live in Raleigh?
Yes, sir. Well, I live in Wake Forest, actually, not too far.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, it was good to meet you here. We're glad. Please keep coming. Don't apologize. We're elated to have you. Welcome.
We're all learning.
We're welcome.
This is true. This is true. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Enjoy.
You guys.
Bye-bye.
Guys. Chikach,
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you.
Take care,
Take good
Jordan.
care, Millers.
Yeah, hugs, Jeff.
Hi,
Much love,
Samia. Thanks, guys.
Hugs. Good to
Text
see you.
the math,
See you tonight.
Marilyn.
Thank you.
Great.
Is that Lee there? She's still on, or she's just doing?
Hi, Lee.
Hi, Lee. Or she's Lee there? Or Rod? No. Someone's chatting. Wednesday mini in the Could be on TIFF.